Well, hello. The purpose of this session is to introduce you to the basics of Adobe InDesign. Now, this is for pure beginners, so if you've already used Adobe InDesign before, you can probably just switch this off, because this is for people that have never used it before, never opened the application. So I just want to cover some of the very simple basics. It's a very complex program. It has a lot of features, and so it's quite important just to show you what how the basic layout of the program is. Now, I haven't run it at all on this computer before, on this account, so I'm starting it up afresh. You can see that I've actually got Adobe InDesign on my dock. You won't necessarily find it on your dock if you haven't put it there before. I've put it there for convenience, but otherwise you can find it from the launch pad, or just to do a search to find InDesign. So this is now loading up. When it loads up, we're going to see something that you all should see for the first time. It may be that eventually, as you use it, you will find that the time you load it or the time you fire it up, it won't look the same. It'll look different because you'll configure it for your own purposes. Now, to start with, you're going to likely get a request to sign into Adobe Creative Cloud. Maybe you've already done this now, so you won't need to do this again. But in order to sign in, if you're using your Brooks account, then at one of the computers at Oxford Brookes University, then you just simply go to Continue with Google. And then you'll need to put in your account. Now, it seems like, it just depends on whether you've done this before on this computer, but I haven't done it on this particular computer. So it's asking me to sign in. Now, you must use your student number and your full email address. And then, of course, your password. And I'm not going to save this password on this computer. Now, if you're using one of the computers in the Tong IT suite, then you only need to do this once. So the next time you sit down at that same computer, you won't need to do that again. Obviously, if you go to and sit at a different computer, then you will need to do that. So it's important to think about possibly having a favorite computer. So go to the same computer, or if you like, book the same computer if you can. It doesn't really take very long anyway if you have to do it again. Okay, so this is the start screen for Adobe InDesign. There are different ways of configuring it so you see different things, but we can just simply go here and say either create new from this button in the middle or over here on the left hand side. It doesn't really matter. Or obviously if you've already created a document, then open is also another way of getting access to your documents. So I'm just simply going to create a new document. It's still running through a few of the routines to begin with on the first occasion that you run InDesign, so it is taking a little bit of time. Now it's asking me to decide what kind of document I want to create. So as you can see, we have on the right hand side at the top here, we have print, web and mobile. Now, depending on which you choose, you're going to get different size options and also different units of measurement. I'll just demonstrate that to you without actually creating anything. But if I go to print, then it's going to give me certain standard image sizes or certain page sizes. As you can see, A4 with a millimeter dimension, right the way through to A3 and so on, and even a compact disc or CD cover, which is that size, 120 millimeters square. So those are what you would get if you go for print. But then obviously if you are creating a new print document, you're probably going to actually put in some specific custom measurements for that. And indeed, when we're working in InDesign, we're usually using standard page sizes. But not necessarily the ones that you see here. The other thing is, again, we're not going to do this right now, but if we go to web instead, then you see what we actually get are pixel dimensions. We do still have some of the other types of like letter and A4, but they are measured in pixels, px, as you can see, rather than millimeter dimensions. And then once again, if we go to mobile, then you're actually going to see pixel dimensions, but it actually gives you very specific types of devices, so iPhone and iPad and so on and so forth. So it's important to know that, because of course if we're going to working for print, then that's the dialog box that you need to go for. Then you're basically choosing a name for your document. So choose a name, because then it's going to be saved with the name of that document. Now I should point out to you that naming of documents is effectively a naming of the file. So when we save a file, it is going to save with that name. So if I give this a name, say my first document, then that's the way it's going to be saved. I should do that again. And that's the way it's going to be saved. Now that's quite important to know that, because we don't normally like to see spaces in file names, because that can cause us some issues later on when we're working particularly with web documents. But it doesn't really matter, but that's an important point to remember. So my first document will be the name of the document and the name of the file that's saved ultimately. So as you can see, we can put in dimensions. We can also decide which orientation it's going to be, portrait or landscape, and also how many pages we're going to be using and whether there's a facing pages document. So obviously if you're creating a book, then what you'll want to do is to put in a particular size for your page, and quite often with some of the modules that I'm running anyway, we are using a template, an existing template, so you don't need to necessarily put these figures in. But I'm just going to start this whole thing off with one page, with one column. We can also, right from the beginning, we can use columns if we want to, but we can always come back to that. You can see as well, we can even put in margins and bleed and slug, or that's really the document bleed, the way that the document bleeds to the outside of the page. We don't really need to go into that detail right now, because I just want to show you the basics of InDesign. So I'm just going to simply create that document. And then after a few moments, we'll get the single page up. Okay, so here is the single page. I'm actually just going to make a little bit more sensible use of my screen space. Now, I should also point out that by default, you will get lots of help from Adobe when you first load InDesign. So as you can see, we're getting already help documents. We can go through here and it will tell us all the sorts of things that we can do, what these menu items are, and so on and so forth. So if you want to, you can go right the way through that and have a look. Otherwise, what I'm going to do right now, because it's going to be a little bit disruptive if I use it, I'm going to turn that off right now. This again is another tutorial area, and it's also telling me what's new in InDesign. But again, once again, you can go through this at your leisure and just check out the tutorials that exist right away as you fire it up. So I'm just going to again turn that off, because I want to help you rather than get Adobe to help you. Okay, so you can see I've actually expanded the overall workspace now, so that we're taking up more of the screen. That's obviously often a good thing to do. In fact, you can even, on the Mac, you can even get rid of the dock if you want, by turning that onto sort of hidden. So if I say just turn the hiding on, I can actually take the whole of the screen now. So this is obviously a good way of working. You can always get back to your dock by just rolling the mouse down at the bottom and it will pop up. So that's always often quite a good idea to give yourself as much space as you possibly can. Sometimes you know, you have a lot of menus and so on the screen. It's a good idea to have that space. Now we're looking at this now in a fairly basic way, although actually I have already moved my toolbar, which you can see that's now floating over here on the left hand side. Normally that's actually looking a little bit more like this. That's locked over onto the left hand side, but you can change the position of that however you like. If you just click that little icon top left, you'll see that it converts it into a double spaced or sort of double of columns, and then you can simply move that, drag that onto the screen, onto the area here. This area, by the way, around the page document that we're seeing here, the single page, is called the pasteboard, where you can actually put content before you're ready to put it actually onto the page. Now, I should explain, the thing about InDesign is that there are quite a lot of different ways to get access to all of the items. Now, you'll see that one of the things about InDesign, you just mustn't get too nervous, and for the first time when you use InDesign, it can be quite daunting because there are just so many things on the menu. So, for example, if you look at some of the menu items up here, window, view, table, object, there are lots of things on the menus, and you can get a little bit, well, a lot to be concerned about. But the thing is that what this window, the important thing about this window menu is this actually brings things onto the area that you're working, so that you can actually quickly get access to them. So, for example, if you want to see the pages, just click on Pages there under the Window menu, and then you will get the Pages panel over here on the right-hand side. Or let's say we want to have a look at we want to check out some of the paragraph styles. Well, we do that under Styles and then Paragraph Styles. And as you can see, we then have a floating panel with our paragraph styles. Now, currently, that's just a basic paragraph. That is all we've got. But the important thing about this is that you don't really want to be doing it that way. It's not a good idea to try to find things by going up here each time. A better idea is to use what we call a workspace. And you can see that you have existing workspaces that you can call upon. So let's say, for example, you want to use typography a lot. Click on that workspace, and then over here on the right hand side are all of the elements that you might want to use, just simply to your convenience over on the right hand side. So, for example, if we want to look at paragraph styles again, you just click over here and that brings it out flies out from that point. You don't need to have it floating necessarily, just use it when you need it. And then if we want to look at pages, that paragraph styles goes away, and then up comes the Pages panel. Similarly, if we want to look at, for example, character styles, same thing. Click on character styles, and the menu pops out from there. So that's actually quite a convenient way of getting access to the menu items. The other thing I should point out is that you can actually configure this as you like, and then you can save that workspace for yourself. So, for example, let's actually just put that away for the moment. Let's say, for example, I want to have available to me on the menu as well, quite quickly, my links panel. Okay, now links means really connected images or documents. So, for example, every time you place an image onto your InDesign document, you need to maintain a link to that image, and this is what's going to be listed over here. However, rather than have this as a floating panel, what you can do is to shrink that down and then drag it onto your bar on the right. So you've now got that available to you very quickly. So we can just click there, and as you can see, the links panel comes up. Let's just have a look at one other thing. Let's say, for example, we want to have let's say we want to see, I just want to make sure we're not bringing something that's already up there. Let's say we want to have our properties panel. Now, properties is quite useful because that's where we see lots of features all in one place. But if I don't want to show it like that, I'd rather just have it as one item. I can actually just drag it down here, and we'll put that back as it was before, like that. So now we've got the properties panel over here as well available to us. So that's a more convenient way of doing it, but what we have to remember is if we go now to Window, Workspace, we can actually say that's a new workspace for us. This is my I'm just going to give it my name, Chris J2. That's now my panel, my arrangement of tools and menu items, and that's going to be there ready for me whenever I come back to this computer, or actually it does actually save in Creative Cloud. So what I do then is, if let's just say for example we go back to a workspace that exists already, so go back to the essentials. So this is how we had it before. This is actually the sort of standard layout. If you like, I'm going to get rid of pages because I actually added that up. So here is my standard. But if I now want to go back to my normal method of using the workspace, I just simply go to my workspace, and that will bring it all back naturally to me. So it's very much a question of customizing the workspace for yourself and making sure that you've got this as you like it, and that you don't have to keep chasing around looking for the elements on the menu. Right, so let's continue to have a look at some of the user interface elements in InDesign before we move on to talk about the actual page itself and what we see there. So first of all, let's have a look at the top. Now at the top, we have this bar here, which has certain elements in it, but it's actually context sensitive. That is to say, it does depend on what I actually have chosen in my toolbar down here. Now, I haven't really explored all of the tools with you yet, and that's something that we have to do gradually, because obviously we haven't got any elements on the page yet to even consider that. But let's just imagine that we're using text, that we want to actually put some text on the page or even create a text box. Then if you choose T for text in this menu item over here, you'll see immediately that the bar along the top now changes to have certain features that are obviously relevant to text. So the alignment of the text, things like the font that we choose, the leading and so forth. So that's what that menu bar will do. So just so that you're aware, that's changing depending on what I choose in my menu items on my toolbar. So if I choose to create a box, simply a rectangle, you can see that this changes, and it changes to, for example, the outline size, the internal color of the box, and various things like that. So that's an explanation of that. There is one further thing that is worth considering, although in my own work I never really have changed this, to be honest, but you can see over here on the very far right hand side you can actually customize this control panel. So if I click on that, you can see these are all the elements in that control panel for the moment when we're looking at the objects. So all of the objects here, and then what happens with paragraphs and so forth. So those things are customizable. You can turn things off as you like. But as I say, that's not something I've really made use of myself. Okay, now continuing on with the user interface before we move further into the actual elements on the page, there's something else that you might have noticed, and that is that I have what is called the rulers on my document. So I've got a ruler across horizontally at the top and down on the bottom. Now, sorry, on the side. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that what we're actually looking at here are units of measure depending on the document that I've set up. So if you remember at the very beginning when I said we're making a new document, we decided that we were making something for print, so therefore we were given millimeter dimensions, and these units that you see here represent millimeters. And further, it's also worth noting that the very top left hand corner is the origin of the measurements that are being made. So the 0 is right in the top left hand corner, both on the horizontal scale and on the vertical scale. Now, another thing about the rulers that's also quite significant is that from the rulers we can actually apply construction lines on our document. Now let's say, for example, we want to make sure that every time we put an image on the page, or a text box, or a heading, or something like that, that we always align it in exactly the same place. What we can do is to use the construction lines. Now we create a construction line by simply dragging from within the ruler. So you can see that I'm just going into my ruler in the top and I'm dragging down from there, and there we have a construction line. And you can also see that the millimeters are being shown in that little item there as I drag it down to help me decide where I want to put it. You'll also, although it's very hard to demonstrate, it will also snap to a position that is exactly in the center of the document. So we let go and then we have a construction line. Similarly, if we go over to our ruler for the vertical lines, and that's in the ruler on the far left hand side, inside the ruler click and hold with the mouse, and then as you can see you can then drag a line, and that actually snaps into the middle like that if that's where I want it. Okay, so we can actually apply as many of those lines as we want. That's obviously very useful if you're trying to get consistency across the pages. However, this now brings me to the next point, because of course we're only looking at one page now. So this part of it is very important. What you have to bear in mind is that in a document that you're working on, you're likely to be working on multiple pages, of course, a document with lots of pages. But in book publishing, of course, it's quite likely that this is going to be a book with spreads. So if we now look at the Pages panel, over here on the right hand side, I've just brought that up, you can see you've actually got two areas, and currently we have one page that we're showing. And let me just explain some of these features. Now, first of all, you may notice that the page itself has a line on the left hand side. That's because that represents the spine of the book. So that's where effectively that's where this would be bound if it was a book. Obviously it's not a book yet because it's only one single page. But I think in order to demonstrate how this works and how we actually work with multiple pages, what I'm going to do is to actually add 2 pages. I'm going to do that by simply clicking down in this little Create New Page document, menu item. I'll start that again. This is an icon that represents creating a new page. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click on it again. Now notice what happens. Now we've got a single page that we started with, but now we've got pages 2 and 3, and those have become a spread. And this again is just, something to understand when we're talking about book or magazine publishing. Something that is bound, and it's a portrait size or portrait format book or magazine, then you're going to get something like this. And so we have one page on its own, and then we have the spread. Okay, so more pages will do the same thing. So we're just adding spreads. Now, if you like, what we actually will do is to ultimately add one more page. And so what we have now, if you notice, is that the last page is bound on the right hand side, because obviously that's the very back of this book or publication. Now, some other things that you might want to be aware of is that what we are working with at the moment, what we're looking at, are the actual pages. So if I go back to that first page here, you'll notice that the construction line that I've created, the horizontal and vertical lines, are only on that page, not on the other pages. What happens if we want those construction lines to be on all pages? Well, what we have to do then is to start thinking about the master pages, and that's what is up in this area here. Okay, you can see that we have a master spread and also a single page labeled none. Now, the idea is that the master pages currently are applied to all of the pages, and actually you can see that the master page is actually labeled A, and on each of these pages is labeled with an A, meaning that the master page, this master page here, is actually applied to all of these pages. This is the default. However, if you want to have multiple master pages, in other words, different types of elements common to all pages or different pages, then you can have more than one master page or master spread. And indeed, the page that's up here called None, if we drag that onto one of these pages, say the first page, then that is no longer, a master page is no longer applied to that page. However, I will just put that back for the moment. Okay, which brings me back to this item of the construction lines as an example. Now let's actually pick up the vertical construction line like this, and I've selected it, so I'm actually going to cut it out. So I've effectively cut it. I've sort of copied it at the same time, but I've cut it off of that page. Now I'm going to go now to my master page for the right hand side, and I do that by double clicking on it. So what we're actually looking at here on the right hand side, this is actually the master page. It's not the page that would be you have to make sure that you understand where we're looking. We're looking now at a master page, not a real page in the document. And in here I'm now going to paste in place. So it's going to paste it exactly where it came from. Okay, so now having done that, if we now go back to these pages, you'll see that I have the construction line there. I also have it on every single page. And that represents a kind of a, the meaning of the master pages, because the master pages is where you put things that you want to be common to all pages. Obviously, one good example of that are the page numbers. But we're not going to talk about that now because that adds another level of complexity. But that's one of the things that you would want to add to your master pages in order to make sure that they're applied to all pages. Master pages then will be on all of those pages. Let's just go back to our first page, and you see that we've actually got this now on this page as well. But I can't select it anymore. This one I can select. And I've cut it out again of there, and I'm going back to my master page, and I'm now going to paste that in place. Now you'll notice that that's gone across both pages. So currently we have a construction line, just show you in pages 4 and 5, we've got a construction line that goes across horizontally, and only on the right hand spread do we have that construction line. So how do we apply it on the left hand side? Well, we've got to go to this page. And now we've got to create our own, because that's going to be a different one on that page as well. So there it is. So that's now on the master page, and therefore it's applied to both pages on either side of the spread. So when we have something on the master page, it's actually effectively behind everything on the page itself. So if you think of it as on a sort of level, we've got the master page is at the bottom of everything, and then something that's on the page is sitting above that. I'm just going to demonstrate that. We're just going to use simply a simple tool. I'm just going to create a rectangle. So I've chosen that tool over there, and I'm simply going to put that rectangle here in this space here. And then what I'm going to do is to make sure that that's filled with a colour. Now, if you look over here in this toolbar area, you'll see that there's a line through the fill, because that's saying, oh, there's nothing in there. And you can also see up at the top here how it's got a line through the fill area. So what I'm going to do is to choose a colour. We choose a colour that we've already got here. We obviously talk about colours on another occasion and how you add colours or swatches to your document, but I'm just going to choose this red here. Okay, and then also bear in mind that this part of the user interface up here, and also similarly in the toolbar, is showing me what the outline is. Currently that is obviously black. If I don't want an outline, I can simply turn that off. So now it's a red box with no outline. This is actually just telling me the actual dimensions of it. Sorry, by mistake I've made another one, so I'm just going to click off of that. Okay, so this is my red box, and as you can see, even on the thumbnails in the Pages panel, how it's actually repeating on all of those right-hand spreads. So it's on all of those pages. Now, however, if I go to the first page, and now I add another rectangle, so I'm going to choose that tool again, and I want this rectangle to go from here across like this. And again, once again, I'm going to choose a color for that. So I'm going to make this green, and I'm also going to have no outline on it. So once again, I go up to here and choose none for the outline. Okay, so now we've got that sitting. Now you see that that's sitting on the top of that, and it's only on my first page. It's not on any of the other pages because it's simply on that page. Now, there's one other thing before we're done with that concept of different levels and different spaces, if you like, in the vertical plane. We also have layers in any case. So if you see, there is a menu item over here called layers, and currently we have one layer. And that layer is what's being shown at the moment. You can see that I've got a little eye icon. If I turn that off, everything disappears because everything is currently on that one layer. So this makes it, or it adds another level of complexity, because you can have layers that are being shown on the master pages and also layers on the actual document itself. So if I create a new layer, which is now sitting above that layer, and I put my cursor into that and select that layer, and then create another another box, I should say, another rectangular box. I'm going to make this box sit around about here, and that is going to actually have a color blue with no outline again. Just turn the outline off like that. Now you can see that that's sitting above the green. Obviously it's above the red because the red is right at the back anyway. It's also possible for you just to make out that the blue box actually has a red line around it. That's not real in the real document. That's actually just because the color of the layer is red. You can just see over here. If we actually just click the little triangle, it actually shows me what I've actually got in that layer. That's actually quite useful because sometimes you have multiple things on one layer and you can decide to turn them off or move them around in different spaces. In fact, if we drag layer 2 down below layer 1, then it's moved it below the green. So the blue has gone below the green simply because it's actually in the layers, it's actually below it. So that's actually, again, quite useful, a useful thing to bear in mind. I'm now going to just do one more thing, which is to create a text box, and then what we'll actually do is to put some text in there, and then we'll put that again in this area of the document. So let's actually use the T tool over here, and I'm just going to drag a box like this, and then I'm going to put in some text here. Okay, and then I'm going to select that text and actually choose a larger font size. So you can see up in the right hand, up in the control panel, you can see the context is text, therefore it gives me menu items appropriate for that. So I'm going to choose, say, 36 point. I'm also going to change the color of that text, and I can do that simply by clicking on the text itself, like this. Now you can actually then see that we've got the text is here, and that's in black, and I can choose a different color. In fact, I can even choose paper, but as soon as I do that, of course, the text seems to disappear. But if I now drag it over the top of the green, and then move that text or that layer back up over the top, or even take the lorem ipsum text and move it into the layer that sits above there and move it up to there. You can see that I've now put that text over the top of the green. So that really just is just my way of explaining to you how you've got master pages, and then layers, which can of course be used on both master pages and on the page itself. So you've got some level of complexity in terms of the space of where things are. Just one more thing before I let that go. If I select the text, you can then just see over here what it's actually saying is that this little blue icon indicates that that is what is selected at the moment. If I select the red box, which of course I can't do because that's in the master pages, but if I select this rectangle here, which is the blue, you'll see that actually it comes up here as something that's selected. So just going back now to the user interface, this is just really the last aspect of this particular presentation, because I don't really want to go into too much detail about text or anything else. But just one thing to bear in mind finally is that what we're actually looking at in a way at the moment is our way of working. So we've got construction lines, we've got margin lines, we've got representations of the boxes, the text boxes and the graphics boxes. These are actually, you can see these on the screen here. If I select them, you can also see the construction lines that I've been working on earlier. So in a way, this is our working mode. But if you want to see what your document looks like, or if you like, preview it in a sort of more open state, then you've got down here in the toolbar the possibility by just selecting that you can actually preview the document. Now in fact I have selected something so you could see it, but you could, in this state, as you can see, I don't have any lines, any extra lines, any non-printing lines showing. And in fact there's a further element to that, because what we can do is to go to presentation mode. And then if we do that, then we see the document in all its glory without any of the menu items. I'm just going to press escape now to go back so that we see it in that state. And then as I say, we're then going to go back. We can go back by clicking on this little button to normal, and that gives us our way of working. I mean, so it's important to bear that in mind, because sometimes you do want to have a look at it without all of the construction lines and outlines of the boxes and so forth, but you should really in a way work on your document with the document elements showing like the construction lines and the margin areas. You should be looking at that so that you're aware of where those elements are. Okay, so thank you very much.